At my father's funeral, my stepmother took the microphone and told 200 people my father had cut me from his will. She said it like she was reading the weather. My husband's final wish was clear, she told the room. Claire is not to receive anything from this family, not the house, not the business, not a dollar. Every face in the chapel turned toward me. I was sitting in the front row with my hands folded in my lap, wearing the black dress my father had once said made me look like my mother. My knees went cold, my throat closed. My father was 6 feet away in a polished mahogany casket, and the woman he had married after my mother died was using his funeral to bury me too. Then, just when Marla thought the room belonged to her, my father's lawyer stood up from the third row. He didn't look surprised. He walked down the aisle slowly, holding one white sealed envelope with my name written across the front in my father's handwriting. And when he placed it in my hands, he whispered, "Your father said to open this only if Marla tried to speak for him after he was gone." That was the moment I realized my father had known everything. My name is Claire Bennett, and until that morning, half my family believed I had abandoned my dying father. He raised me alone after my mother died, and for years it was just the two of us. Then he married Marla. And slowly, without anyone seeing the whole picture, she tried to remove me from his life. At first, she did it quietly. A missed phone call here, a changed dinner plan there, a message from my father that sounded colder than him, a holiday invitation that somehow never reached me. By the time he got sick, Marla had built a wall around him, then convinced half the family I was the one who had walked away. But my father had left me proof. Not gossip, not emotion, proof. Inside that sealed envelope were the documents Marla had prayed would never see daylight. And before that funeral ended, she would learn something my father used to tell me when I was little. Truth does not need to scream, Claire, it just needs the door opened. That morning, I almost didn't go to the funeral. Not because I didn't love my father. Because Marla had made one thing clear, I was not welcome. 2 days after he died, I received a text from her. "Daniel wanted peace, please don't create drama at the funeral." I stared at the message for 10 minutes. Create drama. My father was dead, and somehow I was still being accused of causing trouble for wanting to grieve him. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. Then I put my phone down and cried on my kitchen floor until my best friend Nina came over with coffee I couldn't drink. "You're going," she said. I don't know if I can sit there and listen to her talk about him like she loved him more than I did. Nina sat beside me on the floor, then don't go for her, go for him. So I went. I got to St. Matthew's Chapel 40 minutes early, hoping I could have a quiet moment before everyone arrived. My father had been baptized there, my parents were married there, my mother's funeral had been there too. When I walked inside, the smell of lilies hit me so hard I had to stop. White flowers covered every corner, like Marla was trying to make grief look expensive and clean. A large framed photo of my father stood beside the casket. It was not one I had ever seen before. He looked thinner in it, tired, dressed in a gray suit Marla had picked out for him. It was not the father I remembered. My father smelled like sawdust, coffee, and Old Spice. He was warm, messy, real, nothing like the polished photograph Marla had chosen. I walked toward the casket slowly. I had not been allowed to see him in the final week of his life. Marla told everyone I never came. That was the lie that had hurt the most. I had tried. I called the house 9 times in the last week. No answer. I drove there twice. The first time, Marla met me on the porch and said he was sleeping. The second time, she didn't open the door at all. I stood outside my childhood home for 22 minutes, knocking like a stranger, while my father was dying inside. When I asked the hospice nurse about visiting hours, she looked confused and said, "Mrs. Bennett said family visits were limited at Mr. Bennett's request." At his request. I knew it was a lie. But knowing something and proving it are not the same thing. So when I reached his casket that morning, I placed my hand gently on the wood and whispered, "Dad, I came. I tried. I need you to know that." Behind me, someone cleared their throat. Marla stood near the front pew in a black lace dress and pearls, looking like a widow from a magazine. Her eyes were dry. Her lipstick was perfect. "Claire," she said softly, but there was no softness in it. "I wasn't sure you'd come." I turned around. "I'm his daughter." Her mouth tightened. "Of course," she said, "just please remember today is about your father, not about old resentments." Old resentments. That was Marla's favorite trick. She could stab you and then call the blood a misunderstanding. Before I could answer, my Aunt Linda came in. She was my father's older sister, and she had been distant with me for months because of everything Marla had told her. She hugged Marla first. Then she looked at me like she wasn't sure what to do. "Claire," she said. "Aunt Linda." Her eyes moved over my face. "Your father would have wanted everyone peaceful today." I nodded. I wanted to say he would have wanted me allowed in his room. But I didn't. Not yet. The chapel filled slowly. Neighbors, employees from Bennett Hardware, the small store my grandfather opened and my father ran for 30 years, church people, old friends, cousins I had not seen since Christmas. I could feel them watching me. Some with pity, some with judgment, some with that uncomfortable curiosity people have when they believe they already know the scandal. I heard whispers. "She finally came." Poor Marla handled everything alone. I heard Claire didn't even visit him at the end. Every word landed like a pebble in my chest. Nina sat next to me and squeezed my hand. "Breathe," she whispered. I tried. Even the hymn was wrong. Marla had chosen one my father would have hated. The pastor spoke about faith, loss, and legacy. Then he praised Marla's devotion during my father's illness. Then he paused and said, "Daniel's daughter Claire is here today as well." As well? Like an afterthought. I kept my eyes on the casket. Then Marla stood up. I thought she was going to give a eulogy. She walked to the microphone holding a folded sheet of paper. Her diamond bracelet flashed under the chapel lights. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though no tears came. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "Daniel was my husband, my partner, and the love of my life." Something in me tightened. "My husband's final months were difficult," she continued. "There were disappointments, there were absences, there were wounds he carried quietly." The chapel went still. I felt Nina's hand tense around mine. Marla looked directly at me. And while I did not plan to speak about private family matters today, I believe Daniel deserves honesty. My heartbeat changed. Not faster. Heavier. "Before he passed," she said, "Daniel made certain decisions regarding his estate. He asked me to make those decisions known so there would be no confusion, no fighting, and no false expectations." Aunt Linda shifted in the pew behind me. I stared at Marla. She lifted her chin. "Daniel wanted everyone to know Claire receives nothing." A sound moved through the chapel. Not loud. A collective inhale. I couldn't move. Nina whispered, "Oh my God." Marla kept going. "I ask everyone to respect Daniel's wishes. He knew who stood by him. He knew who abandoned him." Abandoned. That word cracked something open inside me. I stood before I realized I was standing. The pastor went pale. "Marla," he whispered, "not here." But Marla had the room now, and she knew it. "I'm sorry," she said, turning toward the casket, "but I promised him I would protect his peace." That was when Mr. Hayes stood up. Arthur Hayes had been my father's lawyer for as long as I could remember, and he did not look surprised. He stepped into the aisle. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, calm and clear, Daniel asked me to be present today for a very specific reason. Marla froze. For the first time that morning, something real crossed her face. Veer. Mr. Hayes walked toward me, not her. In his left hand was a white envelope. My name was written across it. Claire Elise Bennett. Not typed. Written. My father's handwriting had always leaned slightly to the right. He made capital C's like half moons. I knew that handwriting better than my own. Mr. Hayes placed the envelope in my hands. It was thick, sealed with blue wax. I looked up at him. He lowered his voice, but everyone in the first rows could hear. Your father said to open this only if Marla tried to speak for him after he was gone. Marla's face went pale. Arthur, she said sharply, this is wildly inappropriate. Mr. Hayes did not look at her. He looked at me. Claire, your father was very specific. My fingers trembled around the envelope. The chapel was silent now. No coughs, no whispers, no shifting. Only silence. The kind that waits. I broke the wax seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, a small set of copied documents, and a key. A brass key with a blue tag. My childhood house key. I saw the first line of the letter and almost dropped it. My Claire. If you are reading this in public, then Marla did what I feared she would do. My knees weakened. Nina stood beside me, steadying me with one hand on my back. I kept reading. I am sorry I did not protect you sooner. I know you came, I know you called, I know you were kept from me, I know because I heard you knocking. A small sound escaped me. I covered my mouth. The room blurred. I heard someone behind me whisper, "What?" I forced myself to keep reading. I never cut you from my will, I never wanted you away from me, and I never believed you abandoned me. The truth is in this envelope. Let Mr. Hayes help you open the door. The letter ended with one line. You were my daughter before anyone else was my wife. I stood there in front of my father's casket, holding the only words I had needed for months. He knew. He knew I came. He knew I loved him. And Marla had known he knew. Because she was shaking. Not crying. Shaking. Claire, she said too quickly, that letter is private. This is grief talking. Your father was medicated, confused. Mr. Hayes turned toward her. Daniel wrote that letter in my office 6 weeks before his death, in the presence of 2 witnesses and his physician. The chapel went colder. Marla opened her mouth, then closed it. Mr. Hayes looked at the pastor. Reverend, I apologize for interrupting the service, but since Mrs. Bennett chose to make estate claims publicly, I am obligated to correct the record. Marla snapped, you are obligated to nothing in a church. No, he said, I am obligated to my client. That line moved through the room like a match catching paper. My father was still his client. Even dead, my father still had someone standing between Marla and the lie. I wanted to read everything right there, but Mr. Hayes gently touched the documents. Not here, he said softly, not beside him, come with me after the service. I looked at Marla. For once, she couldn't look back. The pastor cleared his throat and tried to return the service to prayer, but the room had changed. Every hymn sounded strange after that. Every sentence about peace sounded like a question. When the final prayer ended, no one moved at first. Then people began standing slowly, hugging each other, wiping tears, pretending they had not just watched a widow get caught trying to erase a daughter beside her father's coffin. Aunt Linda came toward me. Her face had changed. Claire, she whispered, is that true you came to the house? I looked at her. Twice. Her eyes filled. Marla told us you refused to see him. I begged to see him. Aunt Linda brought her hand to her mouth. Behind her, my cousin Mark looked away, ashamed. Marla moved fast. She walked toward me with her purse clutched under her arm, smiling tightly like she could still save the scene. Claire, we need to discuss this privately. No, I said. It was the first word I had spoken to her all morning. Her smile twitched. This is not the place. You made it the place. The room seemed to stop around us. Marla glanced at the people nearby. She lowered her voice. You are emotional, I understand that, but if you embarrass me today, you will regret it. There she was. Not the grieving widow. Not the devoted wife. The woman who had stood between me and my dying father. I held up the envelope. I think you've confused regret with evidence. Her eyes flicked to the envelope. For the first time in all the years I had known her, Marla had nothing ready to say. Mr. Hayes stepped beside me. Claire, your father requested a private reading after the burial. The family room at the funeral home is reserved. Marla's head snapped toward him. What private reading? The one Daniel arranged. I am his wife. And Claire is his daughter. That does not give her priority. Mr. Hayes looked at her over his glasses. In this matter it does. Marla laughed once, cold and thin. You cannot be serious. I rarely joke at funerals, Mrs. Bennet. Nina almost smiled, then looked down. The burial happened under a gray sky. I stood between Nina and Aunt Linda while Marla stood on the other side of the casket, surrounded by people who had spent the morning believing she was the wounded one. The pastor said ashes to ashes. The wind moved through the cemetery trees. I watched them lower my father into the ground, and all I could think was that I had spent his last months outside the door, blaming myself for not trying harder. But he had heard me knock. He had heard me. After the burial, Mr. Hayes led us into a small private room at the funeral home. There were 12 chairs, a long wooden table, a coffee station, and a box of tissues nobody touched. Marla entered first, like she owned the room. Aunt Linda came in behind her, my cousin Mark followed. Nina stayed close to me, but Mr. Hayes asked if she was family. She's my family, I said. He nodded, then she stays. Marla rolled her eyes. Mr. Hayes placed his briefcase on the table and opened it. This is not probate, Mr. Hayes said. This is Daniel making sure a lie does not become his legacy. He looked directly at Marla. And it was. Marla crossed her arms. Daniel was ill, you know he was ill. Anything he signed near the end can be contested. Mr. Hayes removed a folder. That is why Daniel finalized everything 8 months before his death, while his doctor certified he was fully capable. Marla blinked. 8 months. That was before the hospice nurse. Before the locked doors. Before Marla stopped answering my calls. She had been planning this longer than I knew. Mr. Hayes slid a copy of the first document toward me. The document said my father had placed the house, Bennett Hardware, and several accounts into a trust for me. Mr. Hayes explained gently. Marla was provided for, but the Bennett home, the business, and your mother's personal inheritance were placed in trust for you, Claire. Marla stood so abruptly her chair scraped the floor. That house is mine. No, Mr. Hayes said. I lived there with him for 9 years. And Daniel owned it for 31 years before that. I was his wife. You were also bound by a prenuptial agreement you signed voluntarily. Marla's face flushed. That agreement was old. It was valid. Aunt Linda whispered, Marla, you told us there was no prenup. Marla shot her a look. Aunt Linda leaned back like she had been slapped. Mr. Hayes continued. Daniel also left a written explanation regarding his reasons. Marla pointed at him. You have no right to read private accusations. These are not accusations, he said. They are statements supported by records Daniel collected. My hands tightened around the letter. Records, I asked. Mr. Hayes opened the second folder. Inside were printed phone logs, screenshots, emails, a signed statement from the hospice nurse, copies of text messages. My breath caught. There were my calls. 9 missed calls to the house landline. 14 missed calls to Marla. 3 voicemails transcribed by date. 1 voicemail from me said, Dad, it's me, I'm outside. Please tell Marla to open the door, I just want to see you. I remembered leaving that message. I remembered standing on the porch with rain in my hair, pressing my forehead to the front door like a child. Aunt Linda started crying. Claire, she whispered, I didn't know. Marla sat down slowly. For a second, she looked smaller. Then she recovered. Phone calls don't prove anything. Daniel didn't want stress. Mr. Hayes removed another document. This is a written statement from Grace Holloway, the hospice nurse assigned to Daniel's care. Marla went still. Mr. Hayes read only part of it. On multiple occasions, Mrs. Marla Bennett instructed me to tell Claire Bennett that Mr. Bennett was sleeping or unavailable, even when Mr. Bennett was awake and asking whether his daughter had called. On March 14th, I heard Claire Bennett knocking at the front door. Mr. Bennett attempted to rise from bed after hearing her voice. Mrs. Bennett closed the bedroom door and told him Claire had already left. The room disappeared. All I could see was that bedroom door. My father trying to get up. My father hearing me. Marla closed the door. I turned to her. You told him I left. She didn't answer. You told my dying father I left. Her jaw tightened. He was weak, he couldn't handle emotional scenes. Emotional scenes, I said, I was his daughter. He needed peace. No, I said, you needed control. Marla's eyes sharpened. You have no idea what it was like caring for him every day. You're right, I said, I don't, because you wouldn't let me. That landed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. It landed like a fact that had waited too long. Mr. Hayes placed the final document on the table. This is the most important part. Marla stared at it. What is that? A notarized letter Daniel wrote after discovering irregular withdrawals from one of his accounts. Marla's face drained. My cousin Mark leaned forward. What withdrawals? Mr. Hayes didn't answer him directly. He slid copies across the table. There were bank statements. Amounts circled. Thousands of dollars had been moved into an account under Marla's maiden name. Dates from the last year of my father's life. Marla slammed her palm on the table. Those were household expenses. Mr. Hayes looked at her calmly. The memo lines claimed renovations, caregiving, and medical equipment, but Daniel's records showed none of those expenses were real. The room went completely silent. Marla looked around, waiting for someone to rescue her. No one moved. Aunt Linda stared at the bank statements like she was seeing Marla for the first time. Mark muttered, Jesus. Mr. Hayes continued. Daniel did not pursue charges before his death. He told me he did not have the strength, but he wanted the documents preserved in case Marla attempted to misrepresent his wishes after his passing. He closed the folder. Oh, she did. Marla stood again. This time her voice cracked. I gave him years, Marla snapped. I gave him my life. Aunt Linda looked up. You gave him a locked door. Marla turned on her. Don't you dare judge me, you weren't there. No, Aunt Linda said quietly, but Claire was outside. Marla looked at me with hatred so keen it almost looked like grief. You think this makes you special, she said. You think a dead man's letter makes you loved. I stood slowly. Nina touched my arm, but I was calm. Strangely calm. For months I had imagined yelling at Marla, screaming until my voice broke, asking her why, asking how she could watch a daughter beg at a door and not open it. But standing there with my father's handwriting in my hands, I didn't need to beg for anything. Not answers. Not approval. Not belonging. You didn't cut me from his life because I stopped loving him, I said. You cut me from his life because you knew he never stopped loving me. Marla's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I took the brass key from the envelope and placed it on the table. My father left me a key, I said, not because of the house, because he wanted me to know the door was never supposed to be locked. Aunt Linda began to sob. Marla grabbed her purse. This is not over. Mr. Hayes looked at her. Legally, it is very much beginning. She glared at him, then at me. You'll regret humiliating me. I shook my head. You humiliated yourself, I just opened the envelope. She walked out. No dramatic collapse. No apology. No begging. Just the sound of her heels striking the floor too hard, too fast, as everyone she had lied to watched her leave. And somehow, that was more satisfying than any scream could have been. After she left, I looked down at the letter again. My Claire. I had not heard my father's voice in months, but I could hear it in those two words. Aunt Linda came to me slowly. I believed her, she said. I didn't say anything. She wiped her eyes. She told me you were angry about the diagnosis, that you couldn't handle seeing him sick, that you stopped coming because you wanted to remember him strong. I swallowed hard. I would have sat on the floor beside his bed every day if she had let me. I know that now. But you didn't know it then. She flinched. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just tired of making everyone comfortable with what they had chosen to believe. Aunt Linda nodded through her tears. You're right. That was all she said. And for the first time in a long time, someone in my family did not ask me to make their guilt easier. Mr. Hayes warned me there would be legal steps and Marla might fight. But for the first time, I was not afraid of her. Still, part of me was somewhere else. Part of me was 12 years old again, sitting in my father's truck after my mother's funeral, holding a paper cup of gas station hot chocolate. Back then I had asked him, what happens now? He had looked at me with red eyes and said, now we take care of each other. And we had. Until Marla convinced me he had stopped. That was the cruelty I could barely forgive. Not the money. Not the house. Not the public embarrassment. It was making me believe, even for a little while, that my father had died disappointed in me. After the private reading, I asked Mr. Hayes if I could go to the house. He studied me carefully. Today? Yes. Marla may be there. I know. Nina said I'm coming. Aunt Linda stood too, so am I. I almost said no. Then I looked at her face and realized she was not coming to protect me from Marla. She was coming because maybe, finally, she understood that I should never have had to stand alone on that porch. The drive to my childhood home took 15 minutes. It felt like 15 years. The house was a white two-story with blue shutters my mother picked before I was born. My father had built the porch swing himself. As we pulled up, I saw Marla's car in the driveway. Nana muttered, "Of course." I got out with the brass key in my hand. For a moment, I just stood there. The last time I had been on that porch, I had knocked until my knuckles hurt. This time, I had a key. Before I reached the door, it opened. Marla stood there with 2 suitcases behind her. Her eyes were red now, but not soft. "What do you want?" she said. I looked past her into the hallway. The walls had been repainted pale gray. My mother's mirror was gone, so were the family photos. My father's letter said there was something for me in his workshop. Her eyes narrowed. "You are not going through this house today." I held up the key. "This is my house." Her expression twisted. "You sound just like him." "Good." She stepped onto the porch, lowering her voice. "You think you won because some lawyer waved papers around? Do you know what your father was like at the end? Weak, needy, frightened. I was the one here. I was the one changing sheets and measuring pills and listening to him breathe at night." I did not look away. "And while you were doing that, you made sure his daughter couldn't hold his hand." Her eyes filled with angry tears. "He called your name," she said. My whole body went still. Marla smiled then, but it broke halfway. "He called your name at night, over and over. Claire, Claire, Claire. Do you know what that felt like, to be his wife and hear another woman's name?" I stared at her. Another woman. That was how she had seen me. Not as his child. As competition. Suddenly, everything made terrible sense. The missed messages, the cold holidays, the way she sat between us at dinners, the way she interrupted when my father told old stories about my mother, the way she smiled when family members said I looked like Mom. "You were jealous of a daughter," I said quietly. Marla's face hardened. "I was tired of being second in my own marriage." "You were never second," I said. "You were just not first in every room." She slapped me. It happened fast. A sharp crack across my cheek. Nina shouted my name. Aunt Linda gasped. For 1 second, Marla looked as shocked as we did. Then she lifted her chin. "I want you off this porch." I touched my cheek. It burned. I looked at Nina, then Aunt Linda, then back at Marla. "No." Marla laughed, but it shook. "No. No," I said, "you don't get to lock this door again." I put the key in the lock. Marla grabbed my wrist. Aunt Linda stepped forward. "Take your hand off her." Marla turned. "Linda, stay out of this." "No," Aunt Linda said. Her voice was trembling, but she did not move back. I stayed out of too much already. Marla released me. I turned the key. The door opened. I stepped inside my childhood home for the first time since before my father died. The smell hit me first. Not Marla's candles. Not cleaning spray. Underneath all of that was still him. Wood polish, coffee, the faint scent of the cedar closet near the stairs. I had to grip the banister. Nina whispered, "You okay?" I nodded, though I was. Marla followed us inside, furious. "You cannot just come in here and take things." "I'm not here to take things," I said. "I'm here because my father asked me to come." I walked through the hall toward the back of the house. His workshop was attached to the garage. For years, it had been the one place Marla never cared about because it smelled like oil and lumber and had no pretty lighting. The door was locked. The brass key had a blue tag. Workshop. My hand shook as I unlocked it. Inside, nothing had changed. His workbench, his tools, his old radio, and the crooked birdhouse I made him in 7th grade were still there. I almost smiled. Then I saw the envelope on the workbench. Another sealed envelope. Claire, when you are ready. My breath caught. Nina stayed by the door. Aunt Linda stood behind me quietly. Marla hovered in the hallway, arms crossed, but she did not enter. She had never liked that room. I opened the envelope. Inside was one photograph, one letter, and a small velvet box. The photograph was old. My father, my mother, and me at age 6, standing in front of Bennett Hardware on its 50th anniversary. My father had one arm around my mother and the other around me. He was laughing at something. My mother was looking at him. I was holding a balloon. On the back, my father had written, "The first home I ever had was not a building, it was them." I pressed the photo to my chest. Then I opened the letter. My Claire, if you are in my workshop, then the truth found its way to you. I wish I had been stronger. I wish I had understood sooner that love can be used as a weapon by people who fear not being worshipped. Marla wanted me to believe you had left me. For a while I was confused. The medicine made days strange, but my heart never believed it. I heard you at the door. I wanted to call out. I tried. I am sorry. That sentence broke me. Not loudly. I just folded over the workbench and cried like my body had been waiting for permission. Nina came to me immediately. Aunt Linda put a hand over her mouth. Even Marla said nothing. I kept reading through tears. The business is yours if you want it. Sell it if you need to. Keep it if it brings you peace. The house is yours because your mother and I built a life here before grief, before illness, before anyone tried to rewrite us. Do not let anyone tell you inheritance is only money. Sometimes inheritance is the truth someone saved for you when they could not save themselves. Inside the box is your mother's ring. I kept it because I was afraid Marla would take it. It was always meant for you. Live free, kiddo. And when people say you were cut from my will, smile and let them wonder how foolish they sounded. I love you past every locked door. Dad. I opened the velvet box. My mother's wedding ring sat inside. Small, gold, simple. I had not seen it since I was a teenager. I looked at Marla. She was staring at the ring like it had accused her. You looked for this, I said. She said nothing. You wanted it. Her face twisted. He had no right to keep secrets from his wife. Aunt Linda stepped forward. He was protecting his daughter. Marla laughed bitterly. Everyone protects Claire. Poor Claire, mother died, father adored her. Whole world has to bend around Claire. There it was. The wound beneath everything. Not greed. Not grief. Resentment. You're right, I said softly. My father adored me. Marla's eyes narrowed. And I adored him back. That was not something you had to destroy to be loved. She looked away. I placed the ring back in the box and closed it. I want you out of this house by the date Mr. Hayes gives you. She snapped back toward me. You cannot throw me out. I'm not throwing you out today. I'm following the law, more grace than you gave me. She stepped closer. You think a house and a ring make you his family. I looked around the workshop. At the tools. The birdhouse. The old radio. The letters. The dust in the corners where my father had lived more honestly than he ever did in Marla's polished living room. No, I said, he made me his family the day I was born. You just forgot that marriage did not erase it. Marla stared at me with wet eyes. For 1 second, I saw the older woman under the makeup in anger, a woman terrified of being left with nothing because she had tried to own everything. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the closed door. The voicemail. My father calling my name. And the pity left. Over the next few weeks, Marla tried to fight the truth. But every lie she told ran into the same problem: my father had left proof. Aunt Linda tried to apologize. I did not forgive her immediately, but for the first time, she did not ask me to make her guilt easier. Later, I kept Bennett Hardware open and started the Open Door Fund for families fighting to see loved ones at the end of life. Marla moved out 6 weeks later. She left the house spotless, empty, and cold. She left behind one box in the garage. Inside were old Christmas ornaments, my high school yearbooks, my mother's recipe cards, and 3 photo albums Marla must have decided were worthless because she was not in them. To me, they were treasure. One evening after the locks were changed, I went to the house alone. No Nina, no Aunt Linda, no lawyer. Just me. In the hallway, I saw the faint mark where my childhood height chart used to be. Marla had painted over it years ago, but if the light hit just right, I could still see the lines. Claire, age 7. Claire, age 9. Claire, age 12. My father had written them in pencil. Then I went to the front door. I opened the front door once slowly, just to hear it obey my hand. For months, that door had been the symbol of everything I lost. My father. My chance to say goodbye. My place in my own family. But now it opened. Not because Marla allowed it. Because my father had made sure it would. Marla never apologized. But by then, I no longer needed her apology to know the truth. That night, I sat on the porch swing and imagined my father beside me. For the first time in months, the grief felt honest. People like Marla mistake control for love. But love does not lock doors. My father did not leave me the house so I could feel rich. He left me the truth so I could stop feeling guilty. He left me a key. He left me my mother's ring. He left me proof that I had not imagined the cruelty. And most of all, he left me one final act of fatherhood. He made sure that when Marla tried to bury me with him, someone would hand me the envelope that brought me back to life. I did not forgive Marla. Not then. Maybe not ever. But I stopped carrying the lie she built for me. And on the first morning I reopened Bennett Hardware, I taped a small sign inside the front window. Not for customers. For me. It said, "The door is open." Because for the first time in months, I did not have to knock. I walked in. And I stayed.